It is now 6 p.m. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Granite Falls School Board. Would you join me in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to hand it over to Dana Giesland for our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We honor the first peoples of these lands by acknowledging that the area in which we gather is within the traditional territory of the Stillaguamish tribe of Indians. The Stillaguamish people have inhabited these lands and waters since time immemorial, and their descendants have remained in this territory to this day. The Stillaguamish people have continued to practice the traditional ways of their ancestors of fishing, hunting, and gathering. The Stillaguamish tribe has had these lands and cultural traditions passed on to them by their ancestors who believe that everything has a spirit and that they are the caretakers of these lands and waters.
In tonight's, excuse me, my throat went crazy for saying that. In attendance tonight, we have Director Dane, Director Carey, myself, Director Kincaid, our Superintendent, Dana Giesland, and our student representatives tonight, Lexi and Natalie. I would like to make a motion to excuse Director Gochner and Director Lidley.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to item number 2A, oath of office for our student representatives.
All right, Lexis, have you come up first?
All righty.
You ready?
Sure.
Thank you for being here tonight. All right, then raise your right hand. I, Lexi Sherman, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws
that I will support the Constitution and laws
of the United States and the state of Washington,
of the United States and the state of Washington,
and that I will faithfully perform
and that I will faithfully perform
the duties of the student representative
the duties of the student representative
of the Board of Directors
to the Board of Directors
of the Granite Falls School District,
of the Granite Falls School District,
number 332,
number 332,
according to the law and to the best of my ability.
according to the law and the best of my ability.
Thanks for being here. All right. Raise your right hand. I, Natalie Clepper, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States and the state of Washington, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of the student representative to the Board of Directors of the Granite Falls School District number 332, according to the law to the best of my ability.
That brings us to item number 2B, board comments. Start with you, Director Dane.
Actually, I'm not going to have anything to say.
Okay, Director Carey.
Yeah, I attended the WASDA Legislative Conference past weekend and had some really great meetings. And I'll go into more detail in the legislative session, but some really great meetings with the leader of the Office of Financial Management, talking about the budget, as well as some other discussions and on kind of our priorities as education professionals to the legislature in this upcoming session. A lot of great information that I'll try to condense to the best of my ability there. But I guess the message is this is going to be a really tough session for education. There's a lot of priorities that we are looking to move forward that have price tags afforded to them. And the state, unfortunately, looks like it's going to have some budget shortfalls. I'll talk about that a little bit. So it's everyone is already tamping down their expectations and hopes for this session, unfortunately, because of that. So But other than that, one of the things that I love most about school starting in this time of year, and I wish I knew her name, but there's a crossing guard at the high school right at the first roundabout. She's probably the most pleasant person. I literally look forward to driving past her every morning. And we have this little thing. She screams, "Good morning," and I scream, "You're the best. Have a great day." Like literally, that's like my morning tradition. She's amazing. I know you're going to talk more about your Bridge Builder Award, but she would be my nomination for that. But it's just cool to see kids walking and things happening again and stuff like that. So that's all I've got.
For my comments today, I just wanted to kind of, we got to talk with Lexi last time, and Director Carey kind of offered her a little bit of a challenge in being bold. And I wanted to kind of offer the same challenge to Natalie and welcome you here. And we're really excited to have you. We're here for you. You guys are the reason that we're here. So when we get to hear from you guys and hear the things that matter to you, it means a lot to us. And gives us some purpose and some fight in our blood. So I challenge you to be bold and we will support you. So welcome both of you guys and congratulations.
Well said.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 3A, Superintendent Report.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get started here. So just a little report out on communications and safety and security update. We do have staff news going out every Friday. There's lots of information there. It comes out of our teaching and learning and ed services office, and just a shout out to Don, who did such a great job of compiling all of that. But we wanted to just have consistent information and sometimes repeated information going out to staff so they don't have questions about what's going on or any things that are coming.
Oh, your slide hadn't. It is there now.
Okay, you're good. Family news goes out every Friday. You all get that as well. And that is kind of what's happening in our district, and always a message from me on some of the reflections on the week. We're starting a DLT weekly messaging to our administrators, so that it's kind of one-stop shopping for kind of information around what's happening in the district, the new initiatives and those kind of things. And lastly, around communications, there's family and staff emails and social media updates. And thank you to Paris, who's tackling that with all of us. It's a community effort. The one piece that I would add is just today we sent out information about an award that will happen on the same night as Success in Ed, and it's an award recognizing our staff members who make incredible relationships with our kids. Our focus this year is, of course, on adult-student relationships, because we do know research is very, very clear that that is the secret sauce. When we have relationships with kids, everybody wins. So that went out today. The winners will be announced for that, either classified or certificated, at the Success in Ed Awards event. So Paris, what time did you send that out? Social media and email?
Sometime this morning.
Yeah, like 10 or so.
11,
Yeah.
12.
We already have 29 nominations. So this is Paris from the other room. 20, 25. So I love that, because that's students and staff and community members already recognizing our amazing staff, and looking forward to celebrating on that night in a couple of ways, both the Success in Ed winners and then the Bridge Builder Award. And there's some information about the Bridge Builder Award on the front of each of you. Safety and security action steps. We had a walkthrough. We're going to each building, and today, for the month of October, it was Granite Falls High School. And so I saw some of you at Granite Falls High School this morning. And Marshall, thank you for being there as well. We were able to have one member of the fire service and one member of the police service there. And some good things came out of that. It just gives you a deep dive and a good look into some of the things. An idea that came up today is getting that 3D imaging done with a community partner, so that our EMS has the 3D imaging of the whole building as they walk through the building if need be. And then last week we had our stop, drop, and hold on earthquake drill. All buildings completed that, and we do live in an area that could have an earthquake, and so we want to make sure that we practice that and are ready to go if that happens. On to a brief budget overview. Our end of year report will be at the November meeting, and Marshall Cruz will give that to you all. You might have seen this image before, but I think it's kind of to what Director Carey was just talking about. Washington State's operating budget, in 2019, and then again, this is prior to COVID, was, over 50% dedicated to K-12 education. And that number obviously has dropped to 43%. And with costs increasing and those kind of things, I think this image is significant because it is the battle that we're facing in every district across the state of Washington. And then in addition, the rising costs are something that is impacting, where we are budget-wise. And there's a few examples here, but the cost. People always talk about the cost of milk, right? It's like kind of that thing that grounds us. And when milk gets expensive, inflation is present. And then cost of fuel. Obviously, we drive our buses. Electricity costs, so that utilities piece, and then the cost of insurance, which is significant. You've even seen some of our neighboring districts not able to get insurance anymore because of claims or risk factors and those kind of things. And then the salary increases since 2018. Average salary increase in the state of Washington for teachers since 2018 has gone up 18%, and so that does affect the bottom line. Our current budget outlook, and again, Director Cruz will go into this at our next meeting on November 13th. But we are ending the year, looks like, with about a $1.03 million fund balance at a 2.5%. That's an increase of $600,000 from the end of year last year. This is a really important piece. The September payroll that we just finished, our first payroll of the school year, was flat compared to last year, even though there were significant increases for lots of salaries. And what that means is that we made a lot of reductions. We made reductions in staff, we made reductions in materials, we made reductions in administrators and those kind of things. So we are payroll is the same. We have less people to do the work. So those reductions have offset the salary increases. The budget challenges continue to be the big three, and I'm sure you heard a lot about that, Director Carey, this last weekend. But the big three in the focus is special education, transportation, and then inflation for those MSOCs, those materials and operating costs and those kind of things. But again, those rising costs. We'll have the in-depth year-end review on November 15th. And now I would like to ask Executive Director Moore to come up and give a brief teaching and learning update with some things that are happening in our schools.
Good evening, everybody. Just a quick update on the things that are happening under the teaching and learning umbrella. I do want to mention that all of the accomplishments that you see here are not just out of my office, but the Office of Student Services with Rachel and with a lot of assistance from HR and our partners across the hallway. So in terms of teaching and learning, we are resetting our professional learning paradigm. And what that means is that our intent is to use the experts and the wisdom in the room and across the district moving forward. School of Rock, the feedback that we received, that it was well received. September 25th was a full day of PD, well received. And our principals are now leading learning in the building that is designed by me at this point, but we're looking forward to opportunities to continue to align. And you'll see in tiny print over there that it says $240,000 not spent. So across the year this year, with this reset to using the funds and the resources of knowledge here in the district, we'll be saving $240,000. We are working on alignment to social emotional learning. As you have heard across the state since COVID, really spending some time talking with our students and working to support our students in terms of their social emotional health and their learning and their wellness. And we are continuing that. We started that with all staff on the 25th. We will be continuing that for all of our classified staff moving forward. And your school improvement plans are ready to go for you. Lots of pages to read. At an October 16th principal learning session, we had some time with our iReady folks, and we did some data dive work, and they took that back to their buildings and did some data analysis with staff. In the green there, just in terms of school funding, we have hit all of our marks in terms of all the compliance reports that we need to report to OSPI. And that is, again, attributed to the team working together and answering our questions and figuring things out. So all of these letters, LCAP report, K-4 literacy, learning assistance program report, all of those reports need to be submitted in order to kind of open the gate, so to speak, to allocated funding from the state. So all of our marks have been hit. We did receive our ESEA consolidated grant, is now been converted to a board. And again, these are allocated funds from the state. So this is not magic. It's just we need to make sure that we do our homework so that we get what we need from them. So that award is about $450,000. For our ML students, Rachel worked really hard on the TBIP grant that released about $160,000. And by the end of the month, we're about halfway there. We will have submitted for grants for about $187,000 for SSI funds. So lots of great work there. And so we're super happy about that. And just to be really clear, these are not extra funds. There's no such thing as extra funds in education. These are funds that were already allocated to us that we just needed to release, basically. And they're funds that we're already using. They're already committed and encumbered for our operations. Last bit there in blue, in terms of the curriculum, our ELA pilot team for our English language arts curriculum is up and running. We met yesterday, and there's some great news coming out of that. Finally, we'll have, hopefully at the end of our process, we will have a cohesive design for how our students experience English from 6th through 12th grade. Our CIA team, formerly known as our instructional materials committee, will be meeting tomorrow with Director Dane and a nice crew of about 15 people to work through the work that is directed by board policy around materials and curriculum. And just a small win, as of today, 15 digital dashboards are accessed and running out of teaching and learning. That was a huge labor of love. These are dashboards that manage all sorts of different educational experiences for students, everything from second step curriculum to we finally got access to Edgenuity, which is basically a credit retrieval service for our students. So this is a huge win, and it says in tiny print with staff redundancy. That means that not one single person moving forward in Granite Falls School District will be the only sole keeper of that information. And that has been the biggest mountain to climb between July 1 and today, is making certain that we can access these things and that not one person holds the keys. So next slide, please. Do you want me to keep going?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So you have in front of you, I think tonight, some document about early entrance for kindergarten. And we started working on this relatively early in July because we were getting some questions from future Granite Falls students about early entrance into kindergarten. And as is usual for the newbies in the room, we reference board policy first. And what we found is board policy was what it was, but it was not containing a procedure. So we understood that we need to have a policy and procedure for early entrance for kindergarten, but we didn't have a system around it. So what you have in front of you at some point in your packet is board policy 3110. And currently you have a policy that addresses kindergarten entrance and first grade entrance, but there's no, that should say no accompanying board procedure. What you have for proposed is an updated policy that that includes an 8 to 18 requirement to attend school. It includes entrance qualifications with the same specificity as the old policy, and then it adds pieces around temporary classroom assignment at the discretion of the principal for 25 days, just to see if it's really an appropriate placement for that kindergartner. More information about special exemptions, and it outlines principal decision around placement of students. The procedure addresses the entire process from screening through decision. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer. But we're just looking to create a little bit more flesh, as it were, to the procedure so that we can get the right students in when they need to be, and we can also maybe hold if we need to, depending on the child. So
there are birth dates in there also, and it outlines that. And it's in the absence of procedure. We are left to make some decisions, and that could be different for one family and for another. So we want to make sure that was documented and that we can follow. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
All right, upcoming district and community events. Tomorrow, we're really excited. We have our first Tiger Cabinet meeting. It's students, it's over 50 students. Lexi will be there. It's at Granite Falls High School. And we are just really excited to have this opportunity to hear student voice. There are 4 facilitators, student facilitators, who have created 8 essential questions that we'll tackle tomorrow. And so if you ever want to come to a Tiger Cabinet meeting, please let us know. We'd be happy to have you, even if you can only attend for a little bit of it. But this is an amazing opportunity for us to engage directly with students in grades 3 through 12, and they'll be in groups that are mixed. So you'll have a 3rd grader sitting with 11th graders and 8th graders, and just hearing the student voice and giving us feedback about what's working, what's not working, and what they think. Success in Education Awards, again, are coming up on November 13th at the board meeting. That will be held at Granite Falls High School at the PAC. We'll obviously start the meeting, have the success in ed, and then we'll we'll close that out, take a brief pause, and then we'll come back and we'll have the rest of our board meeting. The WASDA conference is coming up in November 23rd to 21st to 23rd. Looking forward to spending that time with you all. Let Paris know your travel arrangements. Our elementary schools have several things coming. Some Halloween things. It's going to be amazing on Sunday. I will be at Mountain Way with a sensory friendly trick-or-treating event. I already have my bag picked out that the candy's going to go in. So that will be from 2 to 4. And if anybody would like to stop by, that'd be great. Tomorrow night, there's a Halloween bash at Mountain Way also. Some 3rd graders are going to Woodland Park Zoo, which is always fun. And then a Spirit Day. We have Veterans Day assemblies on November 8th, which is the Friday before that Veterans Day weekend. And if you want any details on any of the times or the schools, please let us know. They're also available on the schools' websites. Lastly, at a secondary level, Crossroads High School has a haunted house that they are rapidly putting together downtown, and that will be at the downtown Halloween event. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be great. And I've been asked to judge something, and that's going to be really fun too. So we'll be there on the night of October 31st. Some fall sports updates. This Friday night is our last home football game. It's senior night. Monday night is a big volleyball game against South Whidbey. Our girls won last night. Our girls soccer won last night 2-0. So they are headed to the playoffs. We don't have details quite yet on who they will be playing. And then middle school fall sports completed. They had a pink out on the 21st. And then second season is coming. So they'll have that starting on Monday.
Report.
Okay, moving on to item number 3B, board reports. I'll give it to you, Carl. Let's report.
Yes, and I've got a lot that I'll try to condense down. So we're going into the 69th biennial session. It's a long session. This is essentially where they start and make a brand new budget, and the short session is when they kind of Marissa Rathbone, who leads WASDA, her favorite word is zhuzh, so the short session is where they zhuzh the budget. It's about 105 days. It runs from January 13th to April 27th. There's quite a bit of shuffle in the in Olympia. There's 9 people leaving in the Senate, 16 people leaving in the House. So essentially the takeaway there is going to be a lot of new faces, but even more importantly, a lot of new people that have only been involved with the state and making a state budget in surplus years, and not a whole lot that have dealt with making a budget in shortfall years. So just to talk about that a little bit more, and I'll read you a little snippet from the Washington Research Council. They put out a policy brief, and they say, we estimate that Washington, and this was backed up by the OFM, is facing a $5 billion budget shortfall for 25 through 27. This isn't a revenue shortfall. actually revenues have not declined. Instead, spending has outpaced growth. And the reason for that is they've appropriated more than they expect to collect from forecast revenues, especially in 23-25. And they balanced the previous budget with one-time revenue that we were getting from the federal government for COVID funds and stuff like that. So they've also, unfortunately, also spent down the rainy day fund. So there's not a lot of backing there. So essentially what that means is that we're going to have, we as an education professionals, as an education organizations are going to have a really tough time convincing the legislature that they need to increase funding. However, there's a lot of good detail out there. So the spending, the state spending on education, so the percentage of education spending out of the state budget, back in the early 2000s, kind of hovered around the 40-ish or so percentage, rising up to about 50, right around the McCleary fix. And I always like to do the bunny ears McCleary fix because there wasn't a whole lot of things fixed, but that's another conversation. Where education spending got up to about 52% of the state budget. So the reason I bring that up is because, I mean, we all know the state constitution says that education is the paramount duty of the state. We can all define what paramount means to you. I would say that paramount means that is the majority of your spending. The first level and highest level of your spending goes to this area, which is kind of represented, at least for me, where you would say, well, that should be about 50% or so of the budget. Again, if that's the paramount, that's what that means. But unfortunately now, education spending is about 43% of the state's budget. So we've gotten back down to levels of back in the early 2000s and stuff like that. So I won't go over. Actually, I think you and I got the same part of the same presentation, so I won't go through a lot of that. But essentially, this budget shortfall is before any of the proposed initiatives related to the capital gains repeal or the climate repeal are enacted. And this isn't a political statement. This is just, numbers. So if the capital gains repeal was adopted, that would be about an additional $2.2 billion loss. If the climate act was repealed, they're saying it'd be about 3.8 billion revenue loss and about a 1.7 billion reduction in expenditure. So obviously, if those are enacted, we're going to have some additional shortfalls that are going to have to be accommodated for. So WASDA as an organization has kind of, and WASDA stands for the Washington State School Directors Association, has kind of aligned their advocacy platform this year around a very similar platform to WASA and ASB or not ASB. Sorry, there's so many acronyms. And there are three pillars this year: special education funding, MSOC funding, staffing levels, and transportation. I'm sorry, I said three, but I meant four. And the nice thing about that is everyone, all of the different education organizations are going to be kind of saying the same thing. So the hope is that with kind of a coalesced and common message, we can get some positive movement on it. Again, people are already kind of tempering expectations based upon the perceived shortfalls, but that's the reality of the situation. As far as policies, there's a couple of things that they're already pre-filing bills for that, as far as education, that we're already going to have to, I guess, just have a platform for and be ready to discuss. And probably the biggest one, and I know that even our legislators here in the 39th have signed on to this, which is a cell phone restriction in all buildings. And there's a lot of data out there that actually in some ways kind of contradicts itself, that says, hey, it's a great idea, but you really need to, do these other things to make sure that it is that it is effective. I've seen other studies that say that it really has no effect. Really, really the most impactful thing is to teach people or teach our students to be good stewards of digital information and stuff like that, and yada yada. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. I know that personally, on behalf of Granite, I've told our legislators that we, as an advocate of keeping control as close to the people that will be most impacted by it, let us handle it as a board, as a district. Let us write policies that say whether we want it or we don't. Let that be a discussion of us and not have the state telling us what we have to do there. It seems like there's a decent amount of steam with people trying to move this forward. So I guess we'll see how that goes. There's also a couple of smaller unfunded mandates that they want to push through. The biggest which is a financial literacy class for students. There's some discussion on if that passed, would that be a requirement for graduation or not? But obviously the state's not going to give us any additional funding to buy the curriculum or to set that up or anything along those lines. We'll see how that goes. They were actually thought that they were going to try to get it last session, and at the last minute it was kind of killed, and so they're already filing to bring that back. We'll see how that goes. And again, I'm not saying that I think teaching financial literacy is actually a good idea in our schools, but my challenge is always, especially if you're going to make it a requirement and you're not going to fund it, what does that look like, right, in a school? So anyway, those were the two biggest that seem like they're kind of coming quickly out for us to have to deal with. Last couple of things. One of the things that I was really cool is there's a lot of school districts in our area that have put together kind of one-page sheets that really speak specifically to the special education, the MSOC, and the transportation, the shortages compared to what the state gives us and stuff. Dana and I had a great conversation about it, and I gave her some examples, and hopefully it's something that we could work on, because I think it's really powerful, not only for the families that we serve to know that, but also as we're advocating or talking to people to say, well, hey, these are the numbers, right? Here's what we have to make up in the gap of what we receive from a funding standpoint. So I'm sure Dana, if she wants to move forward with that, will bring something for us to kind of look at there. But I think there's a day on the Hill where I will be in Olympia advocating for Granite Falls, and certainly I try whenever possible to try to meet for coffee or whatever with our legislators or even other legislators around our state. I think this would be a great thing to have in my pocket to be able to hand to them. So just a thought there. The only thing lastly is that I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but I did not run for the legislative to renew my seat on the legislative committee for this next term. Just with work and everything, I just didn't. I was getting at the point where I'm starting to have to make some decisions on my time and stuff like that. So starting, I think it's in February, we'll have a new representative here in District 1. I've heard good things about her. I don't know her personally, but I think she'll be great. Obviously, I will always maintain my relationships and do my best to advocate for Granite Falls, but I won't have necessarily insight track that I have now. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. But I said a lot of things. So questions or anything like that? I knew you were going to ask that question. I know she's not from Mount Vernon because she actually ran against someone who was in Mount Vernon. So I want to say, I don't know. Well,
I
actually,
saw the email on it, but I don't think
Yeah.
it said what her district was.
yeah, I'm not.
And we are working on the one pager. I think I mentioned that to the board, telling our story, right? Because the impact over years of not having the regionalization that all of our neighbors have had is a little bit more impactful here in Granite than it is in some places that like the Lake Stevens, Lakewood, Sultan, pretty much everybody else has had more regionalization, more money. And so I think it's really important that we tell that story back to 2018. And I know Marshall's working on that. Paris already has some little bit of an outline of kind of telling our story. So we should have that for you the next couple of weeks.
That would be great. Marshall, not to put you on the spot. Oh, she's from, oh, no, I was wrong. She is from Mount Vernon, from the Mount Vernon School District, Laura. I'm not going to pronounce her
I was
last name.
gonna
because
say,
I'm
I was gonna
say it
ask you.
wrong.
I was like, I can't pronounce
I'm
that
not going to do it.
either.
I'm going to say it wrong. But actually, Marshall, not to put you on the spot, but I know you and I were having some good conversations last weekend related to MSOC and kind of what that looked like for us and kind of how that's outpaced the increases that we've had. And
The great example the easiest example is insurance. That's affecting everybody. And we were paying about $400,000 a year for insurance 2 years ago. We're now paying $800,000. The state has given us whatever 4% of $400,000 is to help pay for that $400,000 increase. So $8,000 they've given us to pay for a $400,000 increase in insurance.
Yeah. And just so everyone, for the non-educators, because MSOC stands for materials, supplies, and operating costs. Ooh, did I not? Look at that. This guy. All right. And so that's basically everything outside of salaries, right? That's everything else.
Things like fuel and food supplies, electricity, all of those things have had a similar impact over the past 3 years, where we're getting a 2% increase from the state, and the true cost has gone up 40, 50, 60, 70%, sometimes double.
So then back to where I started it. If the state constitution says education is the paramount duty, right? And all of these things are true. I mean, this is non-debatable facts, right? And we're 43% of the budget. There's obviously, at least to me, seems very clear that there's a significant gap that needs to be rectified. So
I guess, and then, we all petitioned the legislature last session about this, kind of late in the session though. And the point that was made is that these are really out of our control. We don't fix energy costs. We don't fix fuel costs. We don't fix the cost of milk. We don't fix the cost of insurance. These are things that we are having to pay and have no choice but to pay them. And we are getting almost no funding to support it.
So can I say one more thing? I'm sorry. Get on my soapbox. So here's the reality of the situation. So you might ask yourself, well then Carl, where does that money come from? Well, unfortunately it comes from levies, right? It comes from, you have to scrape the additional off of levies, and there's a robust and I think very right conversation related to that is not legal. We should not be forced to have to do that, right? But there's no other way, right? It's not like we can say, hey, PUD, we're not paying that bill this month, okay? We have no other choice. That's the reality of the situation. And then, not saying that Marysville School District has done a lot of wrong things, but that's how the loss of a levy, even for a short amount of time, can literally tank a school district, because what do you do then, right? Can't fire people. We have contracts with teachers. We need teachers. Teachers are one of the most important things about an organization. I mean, what can you do, right? So it just puts every district right there on the precipice of financial ruin by the system, which is actually, by the way, one of the most regressive educational funding systems in the entire nation. Texas has a better educational funding system than we have. Montana has a better educational funding system than we have. Idaho has a better education funding than we have. I find it interesting that we have one of the most regressive systems in the nation. So anyway, off my soapbox. Sorry, apologies. There we go.
Can I soapbox you one more thing?
Please.
Our levy is somewhat fixed. There's very stern rules around how much we can ask the community to contribute to school funding. We can go up a little bit, but really we can't go up because based on our enrollment. And we can only slice that levy into so many pieces, and we've already sliced it some pieces of it 12 times to try and pay for things. So to meet these escalating costs, we're having to cut from other places to fund it, not, we can't ask for more levy money to fund it. We can't ask for, we go on every 4 years for a levy, and there's rules for how much we can ask for, and we're pretty close to what we can ask for.
So one more thing. Oh, sorry. Marshall, I hate you. You get me fired up. So rather than saying, hey, what's important to our students? What do we want graduates from Grand Falls to have and to be equipped with to be successful in the education? What do we want to be able to provide Grand Falls students to be on par with the much larger school districts around us, like Lake Stevens and Marysville? Like, what if we said, hey, we want a third-year Spanish class, because we're finding a ton of data that when students are applying to colleges, that's one of the things that they look like, right? And so now a third-year Spanish class that we can only put 8 students in, you can make that work from a levy, right? You could pay that extra. We have to cut those things, right? We're hurting students in the meantime, right? And the disparity between larger districts and smaller districts like us is doing this, right? That the have-nots are getting hurt while the haves are prospering. So anyway. I'm done.
All right. All right. I know that it's your guys' first official meeting, but I wanted to pass it on to you. If you have anything you want to say or report, I'll let you find over who starts or who finishes, whatever.
Well, since I went first for the oath, I'm gonna have this.
Okay.
So, because I've spoken
Okay.
too, so.
I have some things written down just that
Awesome.
have happened and or are coming up. So we had our homecoming game last week, and it was homecoming, and we won the football game on Friday. And we had over 300 students attend the dance, which was a big win for us. And then our leadership students are preparing the Veterans Day Assembly on November 8th. It's going to be held in the morning, and we provided a ton of veterans from over our community to attend. And then the high school this week is starting the food and gift drive, and they're going to be doing trick or canning on Halloween, which is going around and collecting cans from our community. And then lastly, the theater productions are rehearsing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer musical, and it'll be on December 6th to raise money for the food drive.
Really all the stuff that was said about Crossroads and was need to be heard was spoken by Dana. The haunted house is happening and we're getting lots of support from it, and I myself actually have been working on it as well. It's actually really fun. But Miss Roten's class is the class who's been really busting their butts to make it happen, and it's great. I love seeing everybody work really hard to do it. We've also been working on the Veterans Assembly. We've made posters to send out to the Grand Falls Eagles to invite any veterans who would like to come and speak. And you too, Bill Dane, we were wanting to reach out to you as well and see if you'd love to come speak at our Veterans Assembly. Not to put you on the spot, I'm sorry. But yeah, I'm kind of really happy to see everything happening and going on this year so far.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 4A. Items from the floor. Do we have any? Nope. Okay. Moving down to unfinished business. Item number.
Sure, I'd like to
5A.
make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to make I move that we move the special education report from the consent agenda and place it under new business item 6B.
Okay. Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All righty. Okay, we're gonna go to 5A, which is unfinished business first. The second reading to adopt policy 5254, staff expression.
I have no discussion.
No discussion. I move that we approve the second reading to adopt policy 5254, staff expression.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, moving on to item number 6A, new business. That is the first reading to amend policy 3110, entrance qualifications.
I know we're in discussion, so
Yeah.
I think Superintendent Geeson did a great job kind of explaining the why. Actually, I'm sorry. I think our cabinet did a great job
Mrs.
explaining the
Moore.
whys. I'm sorry. I'm actually surprised this wasn't something that we had in greater detail already in policy. So I think it's a great idea, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I move that we accept the first reading to amend policy 3110 entrance qualifications.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that moves on to the special education report prepared by Rachel Corden.
Okay, am I gonna get feedback?
So just real quick while you're setting up, Rachel, I appreciate the board letting me pull this out. This is, as I was reading through this, I was like, wow, this is great information that I don't want just in the consent agenda. I think, we all should talk through it and understand it. I think you did a wonderful job putting the information together and stuff. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had the chance on public record to review it, discuss it, kind of understand, and then we need to make a motion, don't we? Don't we have to approve it at the end?
Yes.
Yes. I see Paris shaking her head up and down. Got it.
Before we start going into the data, I did want to ground us and kind of remind us, not only in our why, but October is Disability History and Awareness Month. So Paris and Dawn from Teaching Learning have done an amazing job of getting staff and community news out there. So we kind of took a mission and vision around what this means. So Disability History and Awareness Month takes place during October to increase awareness, respect, and acceptance for people with disabilities and bring a greater sense of pride to people with disabilities. So our commitment statement: Granite Falls School District is committed to each and every day to raising awareness, respect, and acceptance for people with disabilities through modeling a growth mindset, leadership, self-advocacy, allyship, and education. And so that's really the stance that we're taking. It's going to be a lot of data, but that is the stance that we are taking to take on some of the challenges that we have ahead. So this is our, okay. So this is our October 1 count. So historically, I kind of took a 5-year. We had talked when we had met initially with the board around, it kind of took 5 or 6 years for us to get to this landscape in regards to special education. And so I tried to pull 5-year data just to get a sense of where we were. So the overall is overall enrollment, and then the special education numbers on the right are our current special education numbers. Very cool thing. So Jen Hines pulled data prior to a preview coming out for the 24-25, and our numbers matched identical. Not the overall enrollment, but we are accurately counting our special education students. So 503 was the magic number. Thanks, Lauren. So here's our current special education percentages. We talked about this, earlier, we've talked about it in the past. So really the glaring piece that stands out is that our Mountain Way Elementary is currently at 27.7%. So to put that in comparison, I think on the next slide. So here's our overall rate. So again, I talked about the preview. So Washington State is at 16.1%. As a district, 21.2. So this is based on the Washington State report card. So the blank under current is because they're still working on putting the 24 and 25 final numbers. We'll have a chance to review those. We're right on par. It's 21.44 that the report is showing, and we're at 21.5. The asterisk is just that is not actually reported. That's based on the data that we have within our student services department. So again, just to point out that the glaring piece is that our percentage compared to the state average is about 5% over. So I know we've had conversations. There's been a narrative around somehow that our students in Granite are different. They're different, and then they're fabulous and wonderful and amazing. But as you can see, so I pulled Sultan because their enrollment, their size is pretty close to us. So as a district, they're 18.3%. I combined the elementaries. It was hard to find one that matched our model identical, and then middle school and high school. So there are some wins here. We're still high at the secondary level, but we're definitely on par with neighboring districts. Really the challenging pieces around just our overall percentage, and especially at our elementaries. So I combined Mountain Way, that 27.7%, and Monte Cristo at 20, just to kind of give an average around what is being reported and some of the challenges that teaching and learning I have at this time. So this was our staffing over the last 5 years. Pretty stable. We did reduce 1.4 certificated teachers. We had 1 paraeducator reduction, and then the other certificated staff reduced a little bit. So that's like our SLPs, or anybody that has like an ESA certificate. So that 12 doesn't include our nurses, our HRAs, our SLPAs. So just to kind of put that in perspective, that it doesn't represent all of our staff that are working within special education. So the funding pieces, so funding cap for special education last year was raised from 15 to 16. 94 of the 318 school districts are over that 15% funding cap for last year. Currently, we're 5.4% over the 16. And then the threshold piece I put in there, just so you're aware. So we essentially, a lot of times we talk about safety net, and essentially we are that first $40,000, we are covering that cost regardless. And then we're able to submit for anything over that. So right now we're slightly above where we're budgeted for 24-25. So again, last 5 years, just to kind of give you a sense of, so when we say safety net, we're just talking about high cost students, students that have, for example, nursing services or require one-on-one to access their education. We're estimated to be pretty close to where we were last year. We did have a couple students that were out of state who graduated, and so it may be slightly less, and that would be the why.
Really quickly, Washington State is, for special education, is a flat funded state. And the federal government comes in for anybody who's flat funded. So a certain dollar amount for every child who qualifies for special education services is X dollars. And it doesn't matter how many services they have. They could, cost a district $80,000, or they could cost a district $5,000, and you still get, let's say, $10,000. And so because of that, they have to have a way for the district to recoup some of those costs. When Rachel was referring to the 39,000, or let's just round it up to 40,000, that's that gap. So you have to spend that first before you can recoup any of those funds. So let's say we get, for round numbers purposes, let's say we get 10,000 additional dollars for a child. Let's say they cost 42,000, right, with all of their services. We have to get to that 40,000 anyway. So you might, we got the 10,000. So there's 32,000 that's out of pocket, and we wouldn't qualify for safety net as a result of that. So that's that gap that you hear people refer to all the time when we're talking about funding and those kind of things. And then lastly, I guess this is my sort of soapbox, Carl. It's interesting to me that we follow all of the rules and the WACs and the laws around qualifying students for special education services. And then there's a cap and it's not funded. So, do we always need to do better and have rich environments with, differentiation? Of course, but we also need to be funded for the services that we provide.
It's okay if I rile you up a little bit more,
Yeah.
because this is one of mine too. So one of the things that's kind of one of my biggest and infuriates me most when I talk to people in Olympia related to special education funding is they'll say, well, Carl, there's safety net, right? And so because there's safety net, like you'll be recouped over the $30,000-$40,000 for anything you spend. So, and over the years, we've made it easier for you to be able to qualify for safety net. We've made the paperwork less. They're not kicking you out, for technical, you didn't put an and in this and stuff like that, which used to be the case. And all of those things are true, but all of those things also miss the fact that we have to spend that money, right? So Marshall, keep me honest here. We spend the money throughout the year. We submit for safety net in what month?
We spend a couple times during the year. Our final submission, June.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we get notification of the award, and we actually get the award in August and September.
Yeah. So we go all of that time before we spend all of that money before we can recoup it. So it isn't towards the end of the school year that we recoup that money, which doesn't do us a tremendous amount of good. If I told you, hey, you're going to have to spend an extra $100,000 out of your budget, your personal family budget for groceries or whatever, and I'll give you $100,000 12 months from now, you'll go, well, I'm always going to be playing at a negative, right? As soon as you give me that extra $100,000, I'm going to have to spend it again for the next year's thing. That's what's happening with safety net. It's a little too late in the whole thing. Additionally, just to, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Rachel, because I'm sure you're going to talk about this more, but Rachel mentioned that the state only funds us up to a SPED percentage of 16%. It used to be less than that, and that's a good thing. They increased it 1%. Whoop-de-doo, but thank you, I guess. As Rachel's saying, we're at 21%, which means that approximately the 5.5 aren't funded. Again, where does that money come from, Carl? Levies, right? All of these things, and I'm hoping I'm saying this to point a picture that literally Granite Falls and many school districts, and you can see it in Marysville, we are one levy failure from being financially insolvent, right? And that is, I'm terrified. I have trouble sleeping at night because of that. I think a lot of people should have trouble sleeping because of that, right? That to me is crazy, because very rightfully so, students that qualify for SPED, undersped, need services. We should give them those services. That is the beauty of public education. So riddle me this, Batman. Why doesn't the state then pay for it? I can't answer that question. So
Carl, even with safety net, we're still short $1 million.
that's true, yeah.
And I think something that is unique to Granite Falls is that some of our newer parents actually don't even, so even if we have a student who typically has a one-to-one assigned for a full day, we don't always meet that threshold. We're right there at the cusp. So there are certain students, depending on who the paraeducator is, that we're not meeting threshold. So if you go back to slide 7, that's what I was asking, Corey, sorry, just so it was. Oh, that's okay. No, don't worry about it. Go ahead and next one. Next one. That was the slide, right? So I just wanted that up while you were chatting.
Yes.
That's really kind of where we're at. And then the big pieces is that, that 16, we're not funded that 16 to 21.1.
But maybe another thought about the whole levy. Just want to bang your head against the table. If a teacher makes more than $80,000, that comes out of a levy. If we want to have more than 35 classified employees, levy pays for that. If we want to have sports, levy pays for that. If we want to have field trips, levy pays for that. If we want to have band, levy pays for that. If we want to have insurance that's more than the $180,000 that the state gives us for that, levy pays for that. We are so far overspent on our levy that's where we're having to, we want to have class sizes that are lower than 28 at secondary, levy pays for that. I mean, we've sliced up our levy so many times, we're having to cut everywhere to try and offset all these inflationary costs. Sorry.
No apologies. And so just to reiterate to what you were saying, like, yeah, $1.3 million sounds like a lot of money, but we're already overspent by $1 million.
Yeah.
So just some overall graduation data. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. As a state, 4-year graduation on time, 83.6%. Granite Falls currently we're 74.8%. It gets even more stark when you start to look at our students with disabilities. So state average isn't great either, but we're certainly could do a much better job sitting at 58.8% of our students with disabilities are graduating on time, as compared to our students without disabilities at that 79.5% rate. And then the bottom just kind of gives you a chart that we've kind of always been sitting in that range. And so we certainly have some work to do to make sure that all of our students are graduating. So just some risk factors. Marshall touched on these. So our special education enrollment is over 17%. We're at 21.5 currently, so it puts us at risk for lots of things, right? Being fiscally lean, not being able to provide services. And then we've got some disproportionate data around eligibility. So students that are identified as emotional behavior disability for students identified as white is over the proportionality rate compared to the county and the state. And then there's disproportionate data around our suspension and expulsion rates for students with IEPs identified as Hispanic. So you have kids that aren't getting access for a variety of reasons, whether they're placed in a more restrictive environment than they should, or being removed from the class. We have a safety net award over 600,000 that I had shared earlier. And then the safety net percentage over 3% also puts us at risk for high cost students. In 22-23, it's 8%. I didn't have a chance to calculate the 23-24. Maybe Marshall can do some fast math here if you're curious, but it's definitely over the 3%. So in the fall, I had talked to the board, just kind of the recommendations. We did have a WASA came in and conducted a special education management review, and there were 3 takeaways that the group felt that really needed to be addressed immediately. So the first one was approaching issues as a cohesive district level leadership team. You hear Emily and I talk a lot. We present often together. Our staff are getting the same message. We are partnering around things to address the tier 1 and tier 2 and as a team, because really our landscape in regards to special education is a reflection of some things over the last 6 years that have gotten us to this point. Lack of systems of support, so multi-tiered systems of support. The report was a little more harsh. They called it a crisis situation at Mountain Way Elementary. We felt like we were going to take this as an opportunity for students who have lagging to emerging skills and emotional regulation, specifically K-12. So we weren't necessarily calling out a building, but rather just looking at an opportunity for providing some targeted professional development around those lagging skills that some of our students are presenting, and then adding to our teacher toolbox as well. And then the last one, attending to specific issues related to the provision of special education services, programmatically, procedurally, and fiscally. I'll talk a little more about those. Thank you. Not quite at 90 days, but certainly past the 30 when I had shared in the fall. So these are some of the ways that we are working to address some of that data. So partnership with teaching and learning, as I mentioned, human resources and finance as well. So Emily, Director Moore, and I are attending student support team meetings, intervention team meetings. We are working on aligning some of our MTSS, creating a bank of interventions and tools, along with coaching for our building administrators around referral process and allocations of funds. Coordinated grant completion with student programs. So for example, Emily had shared some of the title funds. We hadn't applied for Title III funds in the past. We were able to apply for those this year in just coordinating and talking to each other about what was available and what we qualified for. Staffing meetings around hard to fill positions. So Jennifer and I have been working really hard. Right now, our challenge is our speech language pathologists, our speech language pathologist assistants, and our nurses. And then the last piece, in Marshall and I just completed a survey today around the last 5 years of data and where those special education funds were going. Marshall has a theory about why they were collecting that data, which was a new survey, but really just being fiscal stewards and making data informed staffing decisions. I think today was probably the first conversation all year where I started to have that conversation with Marshall about some staffing needs based on data that we're seeing, but it's also the end of October, right? We weren't having those conversations 2 weeks into the school year. Meeting with teams, building relationships, still working on those pieces, one-on-one principal meetings, again, sometimes in partnership with Director Moore, student evaluation team meetings across all buildings. I've been attending all. I'm working on every other for some of the buildings that are holding them weekly. Our speech language pathologists and our school psychologists meet monthly, weekly if needed for SLPs right now. Behavior support team So we meet monthly as well. And then tomorrow they have the opportunity to go and observe a neighboring behavior program and look at some of the systems that they have put in place. Student support advocates, I meet with them monthly, and this is all part of that MTSS work. So maybe not specific to special education, but all about aligning our systems and support. Counselors, comprehensive counseling plan. I say work, we were able to unearth it. And so it does exist, and we're working on getting that posted on our Granite Falls School District website. We're currently in the process of, we don't have a coordinator right now for McKinney, Vento, Foster, Becca, and Truancy. Again, huge shout out to Jen Hines, who is the administrative assistant, who has taken on all of these pieces for the time being. Paris as well has taken on some huge chunks of time that I would not have been able to navigate on my own. Transitional bilingual instruction team, we meet monthly as well, and created some clock hours for them around some of the learning that still needs to happen around those services. So implementation of current systems, processes, and protocols. So talked a little bit about safety net. We're meeting timelines. I send out monthly reminders to our teachers that have safety net IEPs around this is when I need them, this is when I'll review them, this is when you can expect feedback from me. And then I'm in attendance for all of those IEP meetings where there's any sort of fiscal allocation. So if there's a one-on-one service and or an out-of-district placement, I am present at all of those. Continuum of services, so professional development for all teachers, paraeducators, support staff, and leaders. I'm coordinating with teaching and learning. So for example, today I think I put this under professional development, but Chelsea Wolbert was here with our second day of training, working on the behavior program, behavior intervention plans that are part of the FBAs that we worked on in October. So they came with data, made some decisions, had some conversations, got an opportunity to ask of their peers and their colleagues and myself, and Emily joined at the end around any questions that they were having or challenges around implementing plans. We have a staffing process that's a little slow to get rolling. It was working really well for a bit there around when we have a student who is absent who has a one-on-one. We have a shared spreadsheet. We have some programs that are still not fully staffed, so it's really hard to be able to pull a para, although we've done it, and I gave coffee gift cards. We had quite a few paras that were able to do it early on, but we still have some programs that aren't fully staffed. And so it's really hard to pull from a building to support another building when the building itself isn't fully staffed. But we'll get there. I've definitely seen some relationships between some of our buildings and our building principals increase around this in terms of maybe not working in a silo, but sharing our resources on days where it's available. One-on-one process with intervention data cycles. We talked a little bit about a menu or bank of interventions. So trying to strengthen blocks around things that they're doing not only on the Gen Ed and Tier 1, Tier 2 side, but also making sure that we're putting plans in place and maybe not people, kind of is my motto the last couple months. So really making sure that we are exhausting everything prior to looking at additional resources. Professional development, so preschool inclusionary practices, worked really hard. Jen was super helpful getting some MOUs in place around our preschool teams as we moved to more of an inclusionary setting. So in the past, historically, our preschool has either been self-contained or you're in ECAP and you're getting limited services, and there was no in between. So now we've had the opportunity to create more of a resource room setting, and then we now have a teacher part-time who pushes in and provides some of those services in our ECAP class room. Talked already to add, building leadership is scheduled for the same kind of shortened training on December 5th. So one of the things that came out from the first day of our special education work session was, hey, are our building administrators getting this information? And so Chelsea's going to do a condensed version on December 5th so that our administrators are getting that same training around collecting data around FBAs and implementing our behavior plans. And then Emily mentioned this, the expertise within our current professional learning communities. So whether that means having a mentor who's been doing it a while, working to support some of our new teachers, or simply giving them the time to meet as teams, like our behavior program teachers at the elementary are doing. Challenges or opportunities, as Emily and I like to call them. So time with leadership and staff for professional development, so coaching and modeling. We have very, very limited time with staff. So just finding those Wednesdays, a lot of those times are professional learning communities or they're teacher directed. So finding time within our current contract to meet, coach, and model is certainly a challenge. I don't think that's new to education or new to special education. Systems and alignment work. We really need to strengthen some of our practices around data cycles. In addition to that referral process, sometimes we're very quick to refer and not looking at data as a team, or we're too quick to give up on a plan, and instead maybe you're wanting to place a person instead of developing a plan. So again, ensuring they're exhausting all resources for our students in our general education settings, changing the narrative through professional development. All of our students have the right to access their peers. Special education is not more or extra help. Emily, unfortunately, right, we've had the opportunity to hear conversations like this student needs to be on an IEP, right, with no real understanding of what that means. And so I think part of the challenge or the opportunity is really changing the narrative around what special education means, how you qualify, and pieces like educational impact. And our school psychologists are working diligently at this as well. And then obviously staff shortages. So speech language pathologists, we hire and then they decline. So nurses as well. And then our McKinney Vento back end truancy, we're working on getting that up and posting. Celebrations, mention inclusionary preschool, creating an MOU. We have a partnership with the ESD, so they're going to come in and do some self-assessment work around our current programming and where we're at. Aligned professional development that's really focused on serving our students and families. Brittany McGinnis is amazing and has ran a wonderful program. Got the opportunity to sit in on a special education team meeting that they hold on Wednesdays. And they really have a firm grasp on where they want to go in order to provide peer models for our littlest. And then transition program. So it was interesting, we would look back at the staffing, so we've cut one certificated staff member, yet we had to add a transition program this year. It was absolutely a celebration. Aileen Brower was 100% the right person for the job. So we had to partner with LMC and the high school, really around building that quality program to support our eligible transition students within our community. Shout out to Community Coalition, Ace Hardware, who is hosting and opening their doors to those students. Vocational program partnerships with, might be better on track, something similar, and then Center for Independence, which is a new partnership for some of the students in our life skills programs at our high school. And then neighboring program partnerships as well. So I put Lake Stevens and Marysville School District on there. We had a game night a couple weeks ago. We have a very small group with about 8 students. And so they're actually partnering in events and attending game nights and bowling and lots of social events for our students. And Lake Stevens and Marysville are really kind of partnering in that work. Shout out to Leah's Dream Foundation in Marysville, which does a lot of work and donates a lot of time and money to serving our kids with disabilities.
Remember the numbers there increased because of that legislation around serving until 22 years old. So we have more kids than we thought we were going to have. Now that came to us late last spring. So every district was in a little bit of a panic of, oh, we have different numbers than we thought we were going to have.
Yeah, so initially, I think Arlington was going to take about 4 of our students, like Stevens was going to serve about 4 of our students. And then with the legislative change, they no longer had capacity to provide any sort of transition program. So that was an additional allocation this year, still below budget, even with that addition in terms of staffing, certificated teacher staffing. Questions? It's a lot of talking. I apologize. And there were more than 3 things on a slide.
I've got one real quick, and I was trying to find it in this report, but I can paraphrase it. One of the things that also came up from the WASA report that I guess I didn't necessarily hear you directly, and maybe I just missed it, is they were questioning, or I guess pondering, the percentage of SPED that we have in Mountain Way, right, in those early primary grades, and how could they were pondering why a student in those early grades could be identified for SPED, like what truly is a SPED, is a kindergartner with SPED requirements, and what that looks like. And they were just saying that was disproportionate compared to other districts, as your chart really kind of showed. So I guess I didn't see you necessarily specifically talk about that or address it. I see you smiling, so I'll shut up.
So Emily and I meet every Thursday at Mountain Way. We have some coaching and sessions and some hot topics that we go over with the principal at Mountain Way, Principal Weddle. And then if there are times where I can't make it, so for tomorrow I have a transition program meeting for a family. And so I'll give Emily, for example, some agenda items. Hey, we need to make sure we talk about this and that we have a plan. So we're meeting quite often. Back to the preschool piece. So if you think about, right, so a huge percentage of our kinders, not all, roll up from our inclusionary preschool tier. And so if the model in the past was 0 to 39% of their time, so self-contained special education, or very little services needed and no real options in between, we were getting a lot of kids that had their least restrictive environment, either self-contained or almost 100% gen ed. And so now we have services and models to meet kids' needs based on whether they need more of a push and pull in that gen ed setting or need more of a resource room setting. So we have a special education teacher who has the students that are on her caseload that qualify for services and gen ed ECAP student. When I say gen ed, I mean our ECAP students in that setting. So we've already addressed changing that setting for those students that are rolling up within our system. Now, those numbers, it's really around that referral process. So really looking at those data cycles, and we'll go for it.
I think it's also really important to understand that it's kind of a little bit of a perfect storm. Hey, I'll move it's a little bit of a perfect storm. And so some of the focus of the work right now, it's not just after the referral process, but really trying to equip everybody who is student facing with the tools that they need to understand students when they walk through the door. And our students come to us as they are, bless them, bless our babies. And you know, there's a couple things that are really at play. Are we truly equipping them with the learning that they need? Is their behavior communicating something? Behavior is communication. And are we, as teachers in the room, understanding the source of their frustration? And are we truly equipped at this point to meet their need? And that's what we are working on today. So Rachel works on the SPED side of it and the MTSS Tier 1 side of it. I'm working on Tier 1 in helping equip our teachers with the tools that they need to understand behaviors prior to the referral process, to help students show growth prior to the referral process, because statistically not all of our students should have a disability. And I want to be really clear that as a mother of a child who is truly disabled, I think that part of this work is to help our teachers truly understand that sometimes behavior is just communication. It is not reflective of a true disability. And it's really about meeting the needs of each and every student. So when we talk about MTSS and Tier 1, we're talking about helping equip teachers, equip students with the skills that they need to regulate, to understand the source of those behaviors. For us as teachers to be asking why. Why is that student hitting another student at recess? Was at the core of that? So if we truly understand at step 1 and in Tier 1, maybe we can serve that student and create growth and create success for that student because they truly don't have a disability possibly, and we never get here. So Rachel is working on kind of the after referral process, and I am working on the prior to referral process. So we're truly understanding what we're saying. And I firmly believe personally, my personal opinion, that 27.7%, or roughly a third of Mountain Way Elementary, cannot be truly disabled. And again, I use that word as a parent of a child who will have challenges for the rest of his life. So I think it's really important that we understand what special education really means. Are you really saying that this child is disabled, or do they just need skill training? Do they just need some core teaching in that gap? So
Really quickly, special education laws, honestly, absolutely brilliant in least restrictive environment and access to typically developing peers. Our children do best when they get to learn and play alongside other children. So to Rachel's point, having preschool have a continuum where our children are with typically developing peers. We all learn from typical peers. If we go to another country and we're like, how do I do this, right? This is what this culture, this is how I should behave. And children are no different. And so I think about that, and I think about preschool classrooms that are rich and full of typical peers, and kids kind of figure it out, right? And language development for kids, research indicates if they're around their peers, that's where language development just thrives. So, you know, that emphasis on preschool, that emphasis when we get to kindergarten and first grade and second grade, really having as much time in that least restrictive environment in that general education classroom as absolutely possible, because we can't expect kids to have grade level knowledge and content and skills when they aren't exposed to it. The gap just continues to widen, so we have some work to do there.
Can I ask a question that I don't know if I've ever asked directly or seen in the data? And if you don't have the answer, that's completely fine, because as you were talking, I'm thinking. Of the, what is it, roughly 21% of SPED students in Mountain Way, what percentage of that 21 are behavioral referrals?
So to be clear, the 21% is district-wide. The 27.7% is our current rate at Mountain Way.
20, that's what I meant, the
Yep.
27. So of that 27, how many of those are behavioral referrals, percentage-wise?
I would say just education in general, when you have student support team meetings, that tends to be kids that sit quietly in a class and maybe aren't accessing academics are not the ones often that are being brought to student support teams or being brought to evaluation. So I would say we could probably look up overall data that it's a fairly large percent. I think Dana had asked at maybe a previous meeting around looking at disability category, and we don't have many kids that qualify only in the area.
That's
right.
A little
So
hard to
behavior.
figure it out. So DD is as a soft category that kids can have till age 9. And then we say they have to get a hard category, which would be a learning disability or EDD. And so to Rachel's point, it's yes, kids could have, they could qualify developmentally delayed. And that could be that you have one area that's, not to get into the details and the weeds, but 2.0 standard deviations below in one area, or 2 areas or more that are 1.5 or more below. So it's interesting because yes, they might have some of those things, but behavior, a lot of times, if I can't read, if I can't access, right, if I don't have the language skills, if I haven't had the exposures, a lot of times big behaviors come out and those kind of things. So that's a great question and a difficult one to answer at K1, 2. Sometimes, because generally there's going to be a small handful that maybe are ABD,
right,
their handicapping condition.
Because and the reason why I ask, and that's fine, and I appreciate the explanation, is related to the statistical anomaly. I guess the thing that terrifies me is that we have little learners that just can't, they've got so much, as my mom would say, ants in their pants, they can't sit down. And we're one way or another qualifying those kids for behavior referrals, right? Which is doing them an unbelievable disservice, right? A gargantuan disservice in the foundational learning years of their life that is going to set them back for the rest of their educational career. And that would, that just troubles me. Just real quick, and I promise I'll make this point. Can you go back to your presentation to the outcomes of Granite Falls comparative to the state average?
So while Corey's pulling that up, kind of to address that initial question around, there are courageous conversations that are happening every day. So one example being, like, there apparently was a carryover list. And this maybe wasn't unique to one building, but was certainly happening in that kids were already kind of fast-tracked in the beginning of September. And that was an absolute no from both Emily and I, right? This is a new setting, this is a new grade, we need to collect current data. So those are some of the conversations that are happening daily, one-on-ones. I get asked every day for para support. And when I go in and I look at the students' individual needs, a lot of times they don't have a plan, or they don't have a plan that's been implemented with any sort of fidelity or data cycles. And so that's really where the work is, right? I'm not going to allocate funds unless we've had a plan in place and we've exhausted all of our resources. I will come alongside you. I will observe. I will give you examples. I will be at those team meetings prior. I will, have those hard conversations with parents, right? If that is where we're at, or how you're feeling as a team. I think the other hard conversations is really around that process. It's also hard to walk away from services. Like once that one-on-one is allocated, we do not do, and I say we, like as a system, education does not do a good job of creating independence plans and allowing those students to step away from those one-on-ones. And that creates a challenge because once it's allocated, once that decision has been made, and I take that responsibility pretty solemnly, right? Like if I am the last person that's saying, yes, it's appropriate, I better mean it. And right now at this point, I have had 0 of those conversations because they haven't gotten to that point, because I'm asking that we follow a process, that we utilize data cycles. I'm not asking for them to do it alone. Providing them some tools like I did today around this is data cycles, this is what it looks like, those types of things. And again, another example is our behavior program. Only about 1/3 of those kids that are sitting in our behavior programs at our elementary school have FBAs and VIPs. So tell me how we place those students in a behavior program. Our behavior program teachers are working on it. And we're going to observe tomorrow because I do think there's a better way to do it so that our kids have peer models. The other challenge is that our K2 does not have older peer models in that building. That creates a challenge, right? Most, if not all, I can't think of another example of an elementary that doesn't have K5, which allows for those older peer models, which creates a unique situation for our K2s, especially our K2s that are already placed in that setting.
Thank you for that. Not this slide, but the one, not the funding piece, but our graduation rate comparative to the state average. I think it was after this
Yes,
one.
yeah, 22-23 data. Our data is a little bit, has improved a little bit.
Keep going, one more. That's it, that was it, right? No, the one before. Yeah, that's it. So I try to be fair and balanced in my thoughts, and a lot of my comments tonight have been related to the state and its funding model and the inadequacies there, which is absolutely true, and I'm not taking anything away, but just to be fair and balanced and be honest about our system. And this is not our superintendent, our executive board were not around in May of 23 when this was done. Quite honestly, I take as much umbrage as this more than anyone else because I was the one that was still sitting in here. And if I'm a leader of this district, I have to own this. But believe it or not, I could find a way to be okay with everything that all the challenges from funding standpoint that we have if this slide was opposite of what it is, right? If our state average, our state average was closer to actually it's not this slide, is it? Yeah, it was low graph, I'm sorry. If basically if our outcomes were closer to what the state average was, right? Because that would say, well, we've got a lot of going on, we have a high percentage, we've got a lot of adversity, all of those true, but our students are at or above what the state average. We are doing the things that needs to be done. The thing that I challenge with, and I highlight this, and believe it or not, because I think I'm a bit of a masochist, I do it to punish myself, but I read myself this little snippet from the WASA SPED review that I'll just read out real quick. Grand Falls expends 18.1% of its budget on special education. Well, now it's actually 21%-ish, while the state average is 13.5. That's amazing. The state average is now 16. But anyway, additionally, while examining the Silver County districts, the county average is about 13.8% of the budget. I would say probably it's around 16 now being expended on special education. Granite Falls expends $862 more per student than the Snohomish County average. That's good, right? We spend more of the money that we get on students. That's the way that you would want to see it. Yay, that's good for us. Overall, Granite Falls is spending more per student than the county average. Yay, good for us. But also has the highest percentage of special education students in the comparisons and spends the highest percentage of their operating budget on special education costs. And then I would end to say, and our outcomes are below what the state average is. So we're spending more, we're working harder, and our outcomes are worse. That's a problem in our system, right? That is a big, big, big problem. And
Or an
again,
opportunity.
or an opportunity. And I have, this is, again, I say this to myself because I have to own this, because I have more than enough confidence that the people that we have in place are going to be able to fix that. But that's Granite Falls. That's a Granite Falls problem that Granite Falls needs to fix. And again, I know we have the right people in the place, but that's the unfortunate reality of the situation too. So.
And Carl, that was in spring of 2023.
Right.
So it's even more stark now, right? Because we have qualified, we're even more students are qualified, and we have less discretionary funds. You know, to Marshall's point, right? So it's the perfect storm. So everybody across the state has increased in sped percentages, and that's probably some effects of exposure and then things of COVID and all of those things. And it couldn't come at a worse time for Granite Falls, because now our numbers have increased, and now we're allocating even more money, you know, to offset that, and less money coming.
Yeah.
And can I just say, just because I want to say it from my heart, is that we have a lot of really hardworking teachers and staff. The system that we have in place is a little broken, more than a little broken. And we have work to do in every part of that system. And I have every faith in the teachers and the staff here at Granite Falls that we can do this. But it's going to take some specificity, it's going to take some attention, and it's going to take some time. I have every belief that we have the tools that we need to do this, but it will take some time.
Thank you.
And I was here and present right during the WASP report in a different role. And sometimes people get tired of hearing me say this, but there were some things that we were able to do at the middle school immediately, right, with some good coaching. So some of the examples are, we had students that were coming up into a program that really wasn't a behavior program. So let's serve those kids in their LRE. We have data that is showing us that our kids at the secondary level want to be with their peers. They behave better when they're with their peers. So developing individual plans around what that looks like. We essentially don't, have a behavior program at the middle school. We have check and connects. We have a team that is serving. We had the opportunity to go visit Hidden River and think differently about how students were receiving services. We were able to dissolve a class for a special educator so that they could do push-in, start looking at some co-teaching models. So I think with the coaching that we're doing of principals and staff, I do think that we can get there. We just have to think really creatively around how are we meeting the needs of our students? How are we meeting them before they get to referral? And then how are we making sure that we're providing opportunities for them to be independent?
And a huge shout out to Ms. Clever, who's one of our math specialists who's here tonight. We have already started making moves in tier 1. So moving the most qualified staff in front of kids for reading intervention, and moving the most qualified staff in front of students for math specialist time. So that extra dip of math that they're receiving and targeted reading intervention. I met with the entire title team, including Paris today, and we talked about the science of reading. So we are working it, but it will take time. So,
and the same is true for, we have, Emily had mentioned the $160,000, which is paying for 2 certificated multilingual teachers. So going away from a pair model and putting our experts in front of our kids is another move that we're making across the system. And our kids are worth it. And I think at the end of the day, like, this is going to be hard work. It's certainly not going to happen overnight, but our students are certainly worth it.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess I make a motion.
I move.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move.
Mhm.
I move. To approve the special education report.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Okay. Moving on to item 7, the consent agenda with additions.
Are there any additions that aren't included on here? So then if no one has any problem for the unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent. Pass. Righty. So the time is now 7:34 and we adjourn this meeting of the Grand Falls School Board.
Only 14 minutes over. I'm sorry. I
That's
kept
all
looking at
right.
my
That's
watch.